Hey, Phoenix Ria. Thanks for jumping on. We are with Mark Zinman. Mark Zinman has done my evictions, or his company has done my evictions for over 20 years. Had great success with them. I'm obviously not doing as many because I'm not as much in the foreclosure business as I was, but I refer all my eviction business to Mark. He's the only guy I've really ever known in this market, but he's just going to jump on with us for a few minutes and talk about the state of evictions. Obviously, coming out of COVID, there was a lot of changes and the court systems got backed up. So we're just going to get an update on how those things are going.
It's good to see you, Chris.
You too. So what can you tell us?
I mean, theoretically, I would like to say things are back to normal, but I don't know what normal is anymore. It's kind of just the game has changed. I think there's so many more eyes on the industry as a whole as well. I think there's just a lot more press. There's a lot more legislative stuff. In terms of just straight numbers, I mean, I think in October of last year, there's a lot of news coverage that we hit the most numbers we've ever had since I think 2005 or 2008.
As far as evictions go?
Correct. Yeah, they're saying the highest ever of evictions, that we're back at the peak that we've ever seen. And I think that was in October. I think what a lot of those articles don't account for and what they don't see is that we have grown exponentially since the recession, since that time. I mean, just the sheer volume. We looked at numbers internally at our office, and we should be 30% higher given just the amount of people here in Maricopa. I think we're, a million more people that live here now than they did at that time. So evictions are going to go up. I think per capita, though, it's still lower than it used to be. It's not at the highest it's ever been. So I think that's good for the general market. Rents are coming down a little as well. That kind of has an effect on things. And we see, as I mentioned as well, we see a little uptick in just the foreclosure activity and the evictions post foreclosure as well, which I was kind of surprised to see, actually.
Yeah, like we talked about before we jumped on, just like the moratorium going away, just like there was an eviction moratorium. And like I said, I think the last time we talked, we were coming out of that. And like I said, when before this, I was always used to a 5-day notice, call it 20 to 25 days to a court date, and like 7 days to a sheriff. And last time I think we got on, it was like, 5-day notice, the standard. And it was, I think, 5 to 6 weeks for a court date. And your sheriff, I think the last time we talked, sheriff was like maybe 6 to 8 weeks out.
Yeah, the sheriff, that's actually, I mean, this isn't a COVID related issue, ironically. So we've gone back to, if it's a post trustee sale case, for example, you're doing your 5-day demand. Generally, we're in court within about 2 to 3 weeks now, and then you'll have a trial within 10 days of that. So it's a much better process. But for example, Maricopa County's position at this point is on a eviction out of Superior Court, which is where trustee sales go. You're not talking about just like a regular landlord tenant, but a trustee sale. They have 60 days, they believe, to execute a writ, which is a long time post judgment for you guys to sit on investment properties and not be able to do anything. We've discussed that countless times. That's just an internal Maricopa County policy, and there's not much budging on that from the county attorneys, unfortunately.
Okay, so is it different from just landlord tenant? Like you have an eviction because they're not paying, it's much quicker?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the eviction for like a non-payment of rent where it's a landlord tenant situation, you still just default basic to your regular landlord tenant, your 5-day notice for non-payment of rent. You're in the justice court, which is the difference. As long as the rent is, less, if you're owed less than $10,000, you're in justice court. We're usually in and out of there like 3 to 4 weeks. That's the general process. And pretty much you get the writ 5 days. You're allowed to order it 5 days later, and it's executed within 5 business days. So it's a much faster process on just the landlord tenant world than it is on, if you bought a home, trustee sale, or some sort of transfer of ownership, which requires you to go through a different court system.
Now, so a lot of people in, kind of the uptick in values and all that, everybody was just trying to get a house under contract, and they'd be like, we'll buy your house, we'll give you 3 months to get out. Where does that fall? Where does that one fall? Like, hey, we bought the house, 3 months to get out, 3 months and a day, they're still sitting there. What does that eviction look like?
Yeah, it really depends on how you word it. I mean, if it's truly like, if you do like a seller carryback or, a lease back after the person closes, then from my perspective, that's a landlord tenant situation, even though they're the former owner. So you can go through the justice court, you can go relatively fast, and that's a normal process to what you and I are, historically used to.
Yeah.
But if you just push the deed and the person refuses to get out, then you probably have to go to Superior Court, because
Okay.
that type of eviction is different than the landlord-tenant eviction.
So for those, because a lot of people just put it in a contract. It's just like, hey, we're going to close on XYZ date, and the seller gets a post possession for 30 days. If you don't actually fill out a lease for that 30 days, you could end up in Superior Court. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Potentially. I think if you do what you're talking about, which I know that's done a lot, as long as it's clearly set forth that, hey, we're leasing it to you for a month, we don't have to sign a full lease, we can just put it in the purchase contract. I think that's fine, because then you're saying, look, it's not just a transfer, get out. It's, hey, you've got this lease for 1 month. You can make it a lease for 2 weeks. It doesn't really matter. As long as you're clarifying that there's an end date, then you can argue that you're in the justice court. And I think that's perfectly fine. And
Okay,
it's a
cool.
much faster process.
Yeah, there was just a lot of people that did that post possession to get the contract, right? Because it was so competitive to get the contract, and we were all doing whatever it took to get the deal. So
Yeah, but there's just a difference between like putting out the COE, the close of escrow, because a lot of people do that. Just sign the contract, we'll close in 3 months. That's
yeah,
different than, hey, we're going to close now, but I'll give you 3 months to live here. You're effectively, even if you don't pay rent, you're effectively my tenant for those 3 months.
yeah. I mean, 72 sold was literally putting commercials out. We'll close next week, and you get 6 months. I mean, I don't know if you saw them.
Oh, absolutely. My Google, you got to realize, with my business and what I do, and the same thing with what you do, our Google feeds just like adjust to this, and you see these articles every day. Anything new pops up, it usually comes across my phone pretty quickly.
Yeah. So anything else we should know about? I know that last time we talked, Tucson was kind of mandatory, had to take Section 8. It was mandatory. And I think you were saying that was coming to Phoenix?
So Tucson mandated source of income, which means basically, not to bore everybody with it, but you have to take Section 8 and other subsidized programs. Phoenix went ahead and passed that as well. Tempe just passed it as well. It's less clear whether Tempe even has a legal authority to do it, but they went ahead and did it anyways.
Okay.
I think right now it's potentially tenant advocates are going to look to make that on a statewide level as well. If people don't realize, the legislature just opened up a couple weeks ago. There's a ton of bills already that are very much anti-landlord, trying to delay the eviction process, change the eviction process, those kind of things. So you definitely have to stay on your toes right now as to what's happening. And for those viewers that aren't familiar with that side of things, the legal side, which I understand, goes back to 4th grade civics, there's a lot of bills that'll come out. The majority of them never get signed into law to the governor and signed into law by her. So we probably won't know till like May or June what actually becomes law. People are just throwing out all their wish list right now. So you see a lot of crazy stuff.
And yeah, I think that was kind of the same conversation we had a year ago. It's just like, hey, there's a lot of new, more tenant friendly stuff down the pipeline. Doesn't sound like, from what you just talked about, that it's not too far off of what I'm used to. 5-day notice, 3 to 4 weeks to a court date, and then a 5-day to 7-day writ. So as long as
the only thing that's really changed, if you have multifamily properties with federally backed mortgages, your Fannie, your Freddie, if you're in that investment world, potentially you have to give a 30-day notice for non-payment of rent instead of a 5-day or some variation of that.
Okay.
And so that is a different world, unfortunately.
Yeah. So anything else that has come down the pipe that anybody should renting properties should know about?
No, the more and more I'm just seeing things that are making mistakes on the investor side of things is properly titling your properties and making sure you actually match that to your leases as well. I mean, investors are great about setting up LLCs, putting properties in LLCs, and then they go and write a lease and they put their own name on the lease. That waives all the protection of the LLC. You literally just made yourself a contract with the tenant. It makes no sense, but people do it all the time.
Right.
This is the time to go back to the basics of, okay, how good is my lease? What kind of provisions do I need in there to protect myself, and make sure that it's the right parties that are signing the lease?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I know you're super busy. We appreciate you for jumping on. It's a Zona Law Group. You can just Google him. He's on Indian School in Scottsdale. Like I said, I've used him for all my evictions for over 20 years. So if you need a good eviction attorney, anything else you guys specialize in?
Any kind of real estate stuff, the contracts, the transactions, we do it all. I'm not closing the title, but anything you need to with your real estate, we help.
All right. Send all your business to Mark. He's a great guy.
I appreciate it, Chris. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for jumping on.
Absolutely.